My dad left pound 3M to my brothers. I got £0 because my husband will provide, but I fought back. When my dad passed away a few months ago, I thought the hardest part of the whole heartbreaking process would simply be learning to live without him. Nothing prepares you for losing a parent, not even when you're technically an adult, building your own life and trying to stand on your own 2 feet. I spent weeks trying to process the loss. The mornings when I instinctively reached for my phone to text him. The evenings when I remembered how he'd call just to ask if I'd eaten. The quiet moments that made everything feel real. But as painful as his passing was, I didn't expect the real shock to come later. And from a place I never imagined, his will. Yesterday, I learned that my dad left his entire estate, roughly £3 million, exclusively to my 2 younger brothers. Every single penny, every property, every investment, every sentimental asset, everything. And I received nothing. Not a keepsake, not a small percentage, not a signal that he remembered, cared, or believed I deserved stability just as much as my brothers. Just a sentence that will probably stay with me forever. Her future husband will provide for her. I'm 27. I'm single. I'm not close to getting married. I've built my life around the idea that I have to be responsible for myself because nobody else will magically appear to save me. I studied hard, worked my way into a steady job, learned how to stand alone, budget, and take care of myself in the world. And yet, according to my dad's final words, I don't need anything because one day an imaginary man, a man who doesn't even exist, would simply step in and take care of me. As if that's all I'm meant to be. As if my future is already decided, and all that matters about me is who I eventually marry. When the solicitor read the will and got to that line, I felt my stomach drop so hard it almost knocked the air out of me. I kept waiting for someone to correct it or clarify it or say there had been a mistake. But no one said anything. My brothers didn't even look at me. They just nodded along politely as if this was all normal. That might have been the part that hurt the most, my brothers accepting the estate without a moment of hesitation. They're younger than me and, honestly, doing pretty well in life. They're not struggling. They have stable careers. They have savings. They have support. They have each other. But they sat there in that room, hearing that their older sister was being cut out because of a belief rooted in outdated thinking, and they didn't say anything. Listening to the solicitor continue reading felt surreal. My mind kept drifting between anger and sadness, between disbelief and exhaustion. I sat there trying to hold myself together, nodding as if I weren't falling apart inside. I didn't even cry, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the emotions were too tangled to sort out. When I got home, the silence felt heavier than ever. I kept replaying everything in my head, the lawyer's voice, my brother's quiet acceptance, the way my dad's justification felt like a punch I didn't see coming. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. He didn't see me as equal. He didn't trust me to build my own life. He believed that my needs didn't matter as long as some man someday handled them. And this happened in 2025, not the 1800s. I posted my story online because, truthfully, I felt lost. I didn't know if I was overreacting. I didn't know if I had any rights. I didn't know if I should confront my brothers or simply accept my fate and walk away. The responses were overwhelming, and I mean that in the best way. One of the top comments told me that under the Inheritance, Provision for Family and Dependents Act, 1975, children in the UK can challenge wills that don't make reasonable provision for them. The commenter explained that if my father truly left me out based on the idea that my future husband would provide for me, I might actually have a legal path forward. Something about that lit a tiny spark of hope inside me. I had honestly never considered that the law might protect a situation like mine. But learning that opened a door I hadn't even known existed. I replied immediately, thanking them. I told them that this information came at a time when I genuinely felt at my lowest. And that was true. I had been sitting in my room feeling worthless. Even my own parent didn't see value in my future unless it was tied to someone else. Hearing that I might have rights, that the situation might not be as hopeless as it felt, helped me breathe again. Another commenter shared that they were going through something similar. That struck me deeply, especially when they said the worst part was their relatives taking the inheritance without a second thought. I felt that profoundly. It's one thing to lose something. It's another thing entirely to watch the people who say they love you accept a situation that leaves you empty-handed and hurting. In my replies, I said it was still early days, and I was holding on to the hope that my brothers would eventually stand up for me. I meant it. Despite my anger, despite the shock, part of me still believed they cared enough to see how deeply unfair this was. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that the comments gave me something I desperately needed: a plan, a direction, a reminder that I didn't have to simply accept something because it was written on a piece of paper. I could ask questions, I could seek help, I could explore my options. I didn't have to let this be the end of the story. Another commenter wrote something blunt but oddly comforting, that we weren't living in the Middle Ages, and my father didn't get to decide my worth based on the belief that women need men to survive. I remember reading that and feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because it reminded me just how outdated my dad's reasoning was. Relief because someone said out loud what my heart had been screaming: this shouldn't be happening anymore. In one of my final replies, I said I couldn't believe that someone could still think like this in the modern world, and that was the truth. I loved my father, I really did. But nothing prepared me for the idea that even in his final moments of planning his legacy, he saw me as someone who didn't need support, independence, or security, because he assumed a man would somehow provide it for me. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about everything: the will, the comments, the small flicker of hope, the crushing weight of disappointment. I kept thinking about my brothers, wondering if they knew what to say or if they were avoiding the topic because deep down they knew it was unfair. I kept thinking about my dad, about how he probably didn't mean to hurt me but ended up doing exactly that. By the morning, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to accept being treated as less. Not anymore. Not even by someone I loved. Not even if they weren't around to hear me say it. And so, for the first time in weeks, I felt something like determination growing inside me, steady, warm, and long overdue. I was going to stand up for myself. Update: when I wrote my original post a little over a month ago, I was lost, heartbroken, and running mostly on shock. I didn't know what direction my life would go. I didn't know what my brothers were thinking, and I didn't know if I had the strength to fight for myself. I had never imagined that my own father's final decisions would become something I'd have to emotionally untangle for weeks. But now, after everything that has happened, I'm writing with something I didn't think I would have so soon: good news, and not the surface-level kind. The kind that lifts a weight off your chest that you didn't even realize had been pressing down so heavily. The kind that slowly turns hurt into relief, and relief into something closer to peace. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. There was no movie-style shouting match or explosive moment. Instead, it was a gradual unraveling, a series of conversations, some uncomfortable, some emotional, all necessary. After I learned about my rights under the Inheritance Act and gathered my courage, I reached out to my brothers. I didn't accuse them of anything. I didn't demand anything. I simply asked if we could talk, and to their credit, they agreed immediately. That first conversation was awkward. Not tense, just heavy. They had clearly been thinking about everything too. When I told them how deeply Dad's decision had hurt me, something in their expressions shifted, like they were finally seeing the situation not just as a legal matter, but as something personal, human, and emotional. I explained that it wasn't about the money itself, though of course the financial security mattered. It was about the meaning behind the decision. It was about feeling seen as less. It was about feeling like my future, my stability, and my independence didn't matter. I told them about the comment Dad made in the will, that my future husband would provide, and said those words made me feel like my entire worth had been reduced to someone who didn't even exist yet. I didn't cry during that conversation, but my voice shook. I think that said enough. My brothers listened quietly. For a moment, I worried they would defend Dad's reasoning out of loyalty or discomfort. But they didn't. Instead, they admitted they had been overwhelmed at the reading of the will and didn't know how to respond in the moment. They said they thought I needed space to process, and they didn't want to make things worse by saying the wrong thing. They told me they weren't ignoring my feelings. They were just scared and unsure how to help. Hearing that made everything soften inside me. Over the next few weeks, we continued talking. Small conversations at first, checking in, sharing memories of Dad, slowly building towards the bigger issue. And with every conversation, the walls between us shifted a little. Then one evening, they asked if we could all meet again, properly this time. I didn't know what to expect. My heart was pounding the whole drive there, my mind flipping between hope and dread. When I walked in, they were already seated, looking serious but not distant. They told me they had thought long and hard about everything, not just Dad's decision, but the impact it had on me and on our family dynamic. Then they said the words I didn't realize I had been desperate to hear. "We want to split everything equally." For a moment, I just stared at them, not fully processing. I felt like the air had stopped moving. They explained that they had spoken to a solicitor, without me asking them to, and learned that dividing the estate fairly was actually straightforward with the right paperwork. They both believed it was the right thing to do, morally and emotionally. They told me they never wanted me to feel excluded or less valued, and that they were genuinely sorry for not speaking up immediately when the will was read. Hearing the apology nearly undid me, not because it erased what happened, but because it showed their sincerity. It showed they cared. It showed that my family wasn't broken, just shaken. They also said something that stayed with me. We didn't want Dad's choice to be the thing that separated us. And just like that, something inside me eased in a way I hadn't felt since the day the will was read. I felt understood. I felt validated. I felt like I wasn't alone. We spent the rest of that conversation going through the practical steps, making sure everything would be documented properly, checking timelines and coordinating with legal advisors. Everything was done above board, formally and legally, with no room for confusion or misunderstanding. One of the first pieces of advice people gave me online was to document everything, not rely on verbal promises, so I followed that advice carefully. My brothers were completely cooperative. My lawyer handled everything, ensuring the new agreement was signed, sealed, and legally binding. The paperwork is completed now. The estate is officially being divided into 3 equal parts. Funds and assets are expected to be distributed within the next couple of months, depending on standard processing timelines. Knowing everything is official, not just talked about, brings an enormous amount of peace. After sharing this update online, people continued being incredibly kind. The top comment reminded me to keep everything documented, and I was so relieved to reply that everything was already formalized. Another commenter told me they remembered my original story and felt happy that my brothers showed understanding instead of letting outdated thinking define our relationship. That comment felt incredibly accurate because the truth is, this situation could have gone very differently. It could have created resentment and distance. It could have damaged our bond permanently. It could have turned into a long legal battle that left everyone bruised emotionally. But instead, it became something unexpected, proof that communication, honesty, and a willingness to listen can actually make things stronger, not weaker. Someone else commented that some parents unintentionally create situations that divide siblings, and that it was wonderful that ours didn't fall apart. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it made me realize how easily this could have spiraled into bitterness. Instead, it reminded me that we have a solid foundation, one strong enough to withstand something as painful as this. When I replied saying that I thought the situation would break my family, but instead proved how strong we really were, I meant it wholeheartedly. Because even though the experience opened old wounds and created new ones, it also showed me the depth of support within my family, not from Dad's outdated beliefs, but from the choices my brothers made in the present. The final comment I responded to said something that echoed exactly what I'd been feeling. "The unfairness ends here." And I replied with a truth that made me feel lighter the moment I typed it. "The old thinking ends with him, and I'm grateful for that." I am grateful. Not for the pain, I would never choose to endure that again. Not for the unfairness. No one deserves to feel like their worth is tied to who they might marry someday. But I am grateful for the outcome, for my brothers stepping up, for the support I received from strangers, for the reminder that I am allowed to stand up for myself, and for the reassurance that my family doesn't have to be defined by the past, but by the choices we make now. My father's decision hurt, deeply. But my brother's decision healed something I didn't even realize had broken. And now, finally, I feel like I can move forward. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with clarity, strength, and a sense of fairness that I thought had been denied to me. The legacy I walk away with is not my father's old belief about what a daughter deserves. It's the new one my brothers helped build, that I deserve the same respect, support, and security as anyone else.